Now for the exchange, joining us is Maleki, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Miad, welcome to the program. I was really struck by a post you made over the weekend on X, a lengthy thread about the impact that this blockade would likely have on Iran. And you point out that Iran's oil infrastructure faces permanent damage after just 13 days of a blockade. And crunching the numbers, you're saying the cost to the regime ultimately and collectively would be some $435 million a day. But this is essentially a staring contest, is it not, as to who will blink first and who can publicly at least withstand more pain. Why do you think that this blockade could even last as long as you say that it could? 2 weeks seems like a very long time.
Hi, thanks for having me. No, I mean, it is unclear how long this blockade is going to last, what U.S. governments and allies and partners, how long they can sustain this blockade and how effective it would be. It's obvious that Iranians or Iranian regime is going to really escalate now, whether through targeting the flow of commerce in the Strait of Hormuz or even going after some of these oil production facilities in the Gulf. So that's a possibility. Now, at the same time, the numbers that you laid out, Iran has about, $280 million a day of export that goes out of the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz. About $160 million in import that comes back a day. So you're cutting that out. And if that is not happening, then what's going to happen? Iran's going to have to store its oil that is extracting on offshore storage facilities or on tankers. And, I think within 13, 14, 2 weeks, Iran's going to run out of the ability to store oil. And then they're going to have to drop their extraction, which is going to pose a permanent long-term damage to its ability to extract oil. And that can lead into some kind of a friction within National Iranian Oil Tanker Company, National Iranian Oil Company, labor strikes. And as a matter of fact, it's the regime's ability to pay salaries of its government employees. If they can't collect taxes because they can't sell metals, they can't sell petrochemicals and petroleum because they can't produce any, that is going to really hurt them really bad. We can also account for regime's ability to continue paying salaries.
As Bianna was saying, though, it is at the end of the day a staring contest because, yes, and I'm so glad you laid out just so smartly just how much this is going to cost the Iranian regime, especially as it pertains to lost exports. But it's also going to be very costly for the U.S. to maintain just this naval blockade. When you think about the number of ships, the aircraft, the personnel that will be required to sort of maintain control of the Strait of Hormuz, You've got to also worry about mine clearing, missile defense, convoy protection. Then there's the attrition when it comes to damaged ships, lost drones, equipment depletion. This is also going to be a very expensive undertaking for the Americans too.
Absolutely. I think, but what's going to happen, Iran's ability to continue to disrupt or cause chaos is going to decline as well. I mean, I can assume that it would be some kind of a airstrike campaign or some other means to disrupt Iran's ability to target U.S. and Western assets in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. So Iran's ability to maintain control or cause chaos is going to actually decline. And I think Iran's economy, and Iran, more than any other nations in the Gulf, needs the Strait of Hormuz operations to go back to normal. As I said, if they can't collect taxes domestically, they've shut down the internet for over 45 days now. That's a major source of taxation and revenue for the government and also employment domestically. So they're going to face major domestic pressure as well if they can't get their export back to the normal kind of numbers.
What's interesting, and I think so important to highlight that you raise in your thread over the weekend, is that throughout all of this blockade, it's important to offload humanitarian cargoes for those civilians in Iran that need medical aid, that need food supplies, etc. Just talk to us about how important that is, not just from a humanitarian perspective for Iranians, but for America's image around the world. This coming just days after the president took a lot of heat, understandably so, for threatening to eliminate an entire civilization.
Right. I think at least from a messaging point of view, it's important to make sure that those humanitarian cargoes reach Iranian ports. Now, I have a strong doubts that humanitarian aid to the Iranian to Iran would actually translate into help for the Iranian people. What the regime is going to do is to grab those cargoes, resell them in the market through rounds of commissions and intermediaries. But at the same time, the market is going to receive some food stuff, agricultural commodities. So I hope those continue. At the same time, I'm very skeptical that the humanitarian trade is going to really actually help the Iranian people.
And just speaking about the civilians and all of this, I mean, you talk about not helping the Iranian people, but here in the U.S., what the American voters care about most is really, at this point in time, many of them gas prices, the economic sort of pain at the pump. Doesn't that also put an exorbitant amount of pressure on the Americans as well? I mean, yes, Iran might be losing more economically just in terms of lost exports, but the pressure on the Trump administration from independent voters, from swing voters who are feeling much more pain at the pump, that's going to be an important consideration too.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, as a matter of fact, the Iranian regime has realized that, and it really has. Their messaging has been targeting, the ordinary U.S. citizens. They're actually the Iranian chief negotiator, the head of parliament, who was in Pakistan negotiating with Mr. Vance. He tweeted yesterday with a screenshot of gas stations and gas prices around the White House. So they are speaking into that issue, and I think they understand that domestic pressure here is important factor to get them some kind of a lifeline. Now, very quickly on the threat that the Iranian regime posed to us and to assets, it's not just in the Middle East. What's been overlooked is the fact that Iranians, the same way that they targeted the Israelis by setting up proxies around Israel, same way with the Saudis and UAE by setting up the Houthis and helping them to put pressure on Emiratis and Saudis and other Gulf states. They were working with Venezuela to bring in drone facilities to our backyard here. That's a real threat that back then in the government I was viewing as a serious issue that we would have to deal with if Iran actually establishes military presence in Venezuela with drones that can reach Texas and Florida. Now they won't have that ability. They can't reconstitute that anytime soon.
Yeah, it's important to note your background. You previously had worked for the U.S. Treasury Department, so thus you really have insight into where some of this dark money was coming from. It's just interesting to see whether this would have carried more teeth or weight if the United States had imposed a blockade sooner in this war than now, 6+ weeks later. We shall be following it all. Miad Maleki, thank you so much. Really thoughtful post, and thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.